You may be thinking, okay, well, what about the whole AI portion of this? So we just interacted with this NPC by pressing the E key, and while very slowly, this is actually using WebGPU right now to load up a very tiny Quen model, entirely client-side. I've wanted to try Kimi K2 in an agentic coding framework, and the Moonshot AI documentation does actually have instructions on linking this to an agentic coding framework, such as RooCode. Now, I have a cool little prompt that I have kind of made where basically we will be getting this to make a web-based game using transformers.js, which essentially allows the client's hardware through the web browser to go ahead and actually load AI models and things of that sort. So the core concept of the game will be like an open world where you walk around and you have conversations with NPCs being driven by a very tiny Quen model using transformers.js. Now, truthfully, I have tried this already, and I went ahead and did this last night. It took about 12 hours, and the result did not actually work, but I will show you everything that it actually went ahead and generated, which was just kind of ridiculous. So every single file in here it generated. It essentially went ahead and turned this into like a game engine with test scripts and scripts to test the procedurally generated world, a bunch of really like insane abstractions based off of the base prompt that was given to it here. And as we will see today, this model, even through the official API, which is where I have set up and actually put money in to use this, is extremely slow in its response speed. So unfortunately, when it comes to agentic coding tasks and things like this, which will require a lot of tokens, it is very, very slow and can test one's patience. So basically every single thing we see in this Blockwalkers folder was generated by this model last night using RooCode, and unfortunately the culmination of this was something that didn't really work. So I have gone ahead and stripped down the prompt here, and we are basically going to pipe this into RooCode. Obviously we will kind of go over this real quick. However, prior to that, there are a couple of things that I would like to make note of, at least for those interested in using this model through RooCode. First and foremost, they do have a simple setup guide right here, which basically just tells you everything you need to have set here in the RooCode settings to use this model. As I mentioned earlier, I have gone ahead and actually put $20 into this, and I also got a $5 voucher. Basically, everything I used last night is showing around $3.50. I'm not sure how up to date this usage metric is, but that is not really a huge amount considering the large amount of code and scripts and everything that it did generate. Beyond this, the only thing that I want to make specific note of for anyone wanting to use this themselves is if you go into RooCode here in the settings, they don't have the enable streaming checked in the actual sample documentation on Moonshot's documentation right here. I had an issue with this where it basically was not working. Once I checked enable streaming, it actually did then begin to work. So that is just something I want to make note of for anyone perhaps interested in playing with this themselves. Other than that, everything here is identical to the sample reference documentation from Moonshot. And really, I am now just going to go ahead and quickly go through this prompt, and then we will go ahead and hopefully get a functioning result here. While I'm not going to verbosely read through the game prompt that we're giving it here, the general gist of this is it is an open world game called Blockwalkers, where you walk around a city block, and if you collide with NPCs, you actually can begin a conversation with them, which will be in kind of an AI chat style. This will be driven by this Quen 2 0.5b Onyx model, which is a model that will work with the transformers.js backend that will actually allow this to all work client-side and through the web browser. So this is probably worthy of its own video, but I just kind of quickly wanted to mention this again, as it is one of the core concepts driving the actual AI integration in this sample game. Beyond this, it is really simple. Well, it should be. In the previous test I did with this that failed, that generated like a million scripts, I did also have a little fight mini game in it, but I've stripped that out, and I've basically just reiterated here in the hard constraints that it should not be overcomplicated. We don't need test scripts or a large abstracted code base. Other than that, it is kind of relatively simple, and the only specific things I've given it beyond that is a low poly visual style and to use transformers.js with this specific model. With this, I'm going to just go ahead and copy this right here. I already have everything set up and piped into RooCode here in terms of having Kimi K2 set up. We will just go ahead and paste this and begin. Now, something I've noticed about this, and definitely something that is a limitation of a model like this for agentic coding, is the context length being 128K. Now, that is still a reasonable context length, but when it comes to building something like this, the Gemini context length or something like that just gives a little more comfort and overhead. So right here, I do want to pay specific attention to the to-do list that it has right here, as last time it just went ahead and like it really basically made like a whole game engine. It made test scripts for testing the procedural building generation and everything like that. So okay, this is hopefully relatively quick, and I do have it set to basically auto approve a lot of things, as I want to kind of go hands off as much as I can. There will be certain commands and things like that that it tries to run in the terminal that I will need to manually approve, but other than that, first thing I'm seeing right here is a subtask delegated to the coding agent, which is good. That's what we want to see. And it has a much smaller to-do list for the basic HTML structure and landing page for this game. Speed-wise here, it actually doesn't look bad. I'm not entirely sure what the specifics of their API are in terms of like hosting or like general speed. I know in OpenRouter there are a few providers for this, and the token generation speeds on that are also extremely slow. I always like to opt for actually using things through the provider who made the model, as I think that kind of just hedges against potential misconfigurations and things like that, especially for newer releases like this. So with that, I think we're basically just going to let this ride for a while and see what the resulting product is, as I did last night, which took 12 hours and wasn't functional. So we'll see what happens. So this ran for probably about 6 hours, just kind of going back and forth doing things. It did try to do everything in one single HTML script, which perhaps may have worked, but was definitely not the right approach. So I did just end up kind of prompting it, hey, maybe we should use modules or something like that, at least for specific game elements. It did go ahead and do so. However, the biggest issue was the speed. It is so incredibly slow, and even through the Moonshot API, that it kind of becomes taxing on one's patience when there are issues that pop up that you need it to fix, and it takes 10 minutes to even start reading the file to see what it needs to go ahead and remedy. Beyond that, this does seem like a relatively simple prompt, at least in terms of this game. However, some of the more technicals, like using the Transformers.js and things like that, add a level of complexity that it all needs to work together really nicely. Unfortunately, the model got it to a decent point, but the game never actually properly ran, and trying to get Kimi to go ahead and look back through everything and fix it was just too time consuming. So this is kind of where it goes into the second portion of this video, where while Kimi did kind of architect out and do a lot of this code here, basically what ended up happening is what we see right here. So here is a little kind of very, very crappy looking prototype of Blockwalkers that was partially built by Kimi, but at the same time, basically Google Gemini 2.5 Pro came in and just made sure everything was tidy and would actually work. So what we see right here is truthfully going to be perhaps one of my new agentic coding benchmarks. Think of it like a quilt. So you know how like families have quilts where like all the different generations tack something onto the quilt and eventually it becomes very big? I want to use this as a foundation or a blank slate for basically that exact task. So I have this now as a repository, and of course I will put it on GitHub, and essentially in all of my new testing videos for at least agentic coding and code models, I am going to have them iterate upon this and add things to it. As we see right now, it is very, very simple and block-like and does not necessarily look too akin to a city, although I will be honest with you, it's not bad, but you may be thinking, okay, well, what about the whole AI portion of this? So we just interacted with this NPC by pressing the E key, and while very slowly, this is actually using WebGPU right now to load up a very tiny Quen model, entirely client-side. So essentially you could run this yourself on your own machine in Chrome, and it would actually go ahead and use this Quen LLM to give conversational intelligence and insights to the NPCs. If you recall, Well, maybe not, because I don't know if that's in the video. There were 12 total NPCs that we had, and here is NPC 8 that we have run into. Now, it does not work perfectly right here because this model is extremely, extremely small. And beyond that, it is also quantized. But we have a simple chat interface for NPCs right here. Hey, wanna go and party at the club? Now, as I press enter here, it will seem like it freezes up, but there are 2 quality of life improvements that I would like to implement to this, which I will do as I kind of use this in other videos for other models. The first of those is to swap this model over to okay, so it's just kind of acting as, so they have system prompts that guide their behavior. So this one may be a city tour guide, as that was designated as one. But back to what I was saying, basically, I want to have the Josephified Qwen 3 0.6b model placed in here, and that will just need to be transferred to like the Onyx format to work with transformers.js, which won't be too difficult. Beyond that, really the whole way and the most fun this would be is instead of typing, it will just be voice interaction. So basically you put a lightweight whisper in here or something like this, and then you can actually verbally communicate with these NPCs through like chat, and it will be using an uncensored model in the backend. So what do you like about this vibrant neighbor? So basically, I can't. That is this if you know me, you know my interest is more in like the foolish side of these things. So essentially, I want to just use this for like foundation to see what models can do. Obviously, the graphics need to be improved. Instead of just rectangles walking around, we kind of want to have people, more animations, more gameplay logic, and things like that. But overall, I am quite pleased with this. And truthfully, Kimi did a large amount of lifting here in actually architecting this out and designing it. Now, Gemini 2.5 Pro, which is obviously a state-of-the-art closed source model, did come in and just kind of tidy things up and fix them in terms of some of the gameplay logic and transformers backend. However, Kimi did a large part of weaving this quilt, so to say. And that is kind of the whole thing here. Is I noticed there may have been whisperings about my lack of like intricate prompting or testing these models properly. So I wanted something that was just a little more in-depth than like, hey, make a browser-based OS or something like that. Something that can be tuned and added onto, and this is that. So ultimately, this will become like a fun little like chat, like talk smack thing where you run into the NPCs and things like that. But I wanted to do this, and truth be told, I spent so much time trying to get Kimi to do this in RooCode like fully that I'm putting a video up regardless, because I can't have that time wasted, you know? So that is probably going to wrap this up. I know this was probably a little different than my normal video, but I wanted to just showcase this. And I think it is really cool to actually be able to use like WebGPU and transformers.js for this, because it allows this to run client side without needing them. Oh, you need to go download Olama and then you need to set this up. It's simpler in terms of like implementing something usable for less knowledgeable folks, I suppose one could say. With that, I will put this on GitHub. There are not too many associated scripts here. There's not really going to be an intricate README, so use an LLM or something if you're confused about how to run it or iterate upon it. But with that, that is going to wrap up today's perhaps obscure video. And yeah, I hope you enjoy Blockwalkers and be nice to the NPCs.